Howdy. 2011 Toyota Sienna, rack and pinion. First thing you want to do is tie up your steering wheel so it doesn't move. This is an electric steering vehicle, so make sure that it's perfectly straight, as straight as you can. I just lined it up with this trim piece and then strap it up so it doesn't move. Very critical on electric steering, so you don't get your steering angle off as well as the clock spring off. So once you do that and you've gotten your bolts out of the rack right there, which I had to heat up in order to get off, you want to make a mark on your steering shaft once you get that bolt out there. Here we go with the lighting again. So you want to put a mark on that shaft right there as it comes up out of the steering rack. I'm going to put a mark right on that rubber boot and the shaft so that when I pull this out, I can set up my new one exactly like this. Then my steering wheel won't be off. Hopefully my alignment will be very close to where they have to just make a few adjustments. So that's pretty critical there, to get your steering straight so you don't mess up your clock spring and your turning radius that the computer has set up. So that little rubber cone there that kind of seals up the top, it turns, so be sure and put a line on your shaft as well as the seal itself so you can line it all back up when you take it off. Nearly every manufacturer that I've come across for these rack and pinions, the bolt that holds it to the engine cradle does not come out unless you take off the sway bar. So I didn't take it completely out, I just brought the bolts up as high as they would go, lifted it up, and then the bolt came out. They do that in case at some rare occasion that bolt wiggles its way out, it won't go completely out. It'll stop up against that sway bar. So just loosen the bolts on the bushing right there, lift up that sway bar, and the bolt comes out. So the rack is out. Realign these marks here. And now I'll take a measurement before I take it apart, before I get the outer tie rod off of it. I'll take a measurement from here at the boot out to the outer tie rod end. Whatever that measurement is, I'll put the tie rod on the new rack at that measurement. Measure the other side, and we should be pretty close to where we were. On these outer tie rod ends, if the boot good, I really don't recommend replacing it, even though this thing has, I think, 190,000 miles on it. These parts are manufactured at much better quality than the stuff you buy nowadays. So if the boot is good, just take that stud there and just kind of move it around inside that grease and get it lubed up and just reuse it, because they're much better quality than the stuff you buy now. As long as that boot is not broken, I do with those. And of course, take your measurement again on this other side from here to that outer tie rod end. And then when you go to put this on your new one, just make sure that measurement is the same as what you started off with. So when it comes to putting the new one where the old one is, make sure you've lined up your lines there, and then measure from someplace on the rack itself to a part on the inner tie rod end, get that measurement, and then go to this new one and do the same thing. Measure at the same spot to the same spot here. That way you'll know that shaft is in basically the same spot as that one is. Then you can accurately do your measurements from here on the new one to out here on your outer tie rod end. And then once you've got all your outer tie rod ends on your new one, then you want to go ahead and mark this shaft as well, because in putting it in, it will move around, so you want to get a mark on it so you can, when it's in there, put it in the right spot. And there you go. When you put it back in, just make sure those line up. All right, so everything's back in now, all tightened up. Now, the other thing I recommend also is anytime you're doing suspension, check and recheck all your bolts that you've taken off and put back on. Check and recheck about 3 times. Make sure you got everything. I also put an axle in this one, so I had to take off the lower control arm over there. So there's a lot of bolts and stuff involved, and you definitely don't want any of them coming loose. Could lead to some disastrous driving. So steering wheel's straight, wheels are straight. Shouldn't be too much for whoever's going to align it. And that's the goal. You definitely need an alignment. Anytime you do a rack and pinion, always get an alignment. All the measuring and everything just gets you in the ballpark to where it won't be so far off. Your steering wheel will be straight. Your steering angle will be right. Your clock spring won't come out of place. The clock spring is only so long and only goes so far one way and so far the other. So if you mess up that relationship, you'll be replacing the clock spring. And nowadays, the parts are becoming more and more difficult to find, because personally I think they're using the materials to build new cars instead of manufacturing parts for the older ones. So you really gotta be careful what you do so you're not causing yourself more work, because parts for these older cars are getting harder and harder to find. Be sure and like and subscribe. Really appreciate it. Happy trails.